Alright. Okay, so now we're going to look at painting something, a still life. This is an image I'm going to work from. It's one of the images I sent you. You don't have to use this one here, but it is a choice. And I'm going to do this one using mostly dry paper. There are a couple of areas where I do want to look at putting a little moisture on the paper first, but we just want to try and go about things a different way. If you look at the color of the image, you know, it's a really good clear printout that I've got. I know you might be working from your laptop screen, but it really helps if you can print these out. I had these printed out at CopyMax, really inexpensive. I think they were 64 cents a copy, and it's really sharp and crisp. And you can notice that in this plum, or peach, excuse me, it's a peach. There's yellow and then there's red over the top. So that's how I'm going to paint it. I'm going to paint yellow first and then apply red over the top. Okay, so first of all, let me go ahead and I got a little red on my palette here. Let me clean that off. Where my red should be. I don't know how that happened. Clean that off. Okay. I've also got some, I'm going to move this. I don't like where it is. I want it to be right here by my side. Clean off this green. Alright, so I'm not going to wet that area. I'm going to just take my brush. I'm going to pick up some yellow. This is cadmium yellow, so it's really strong and should do a nice job of showing through even with the red over the top. So I'm just going to, and of course I've got my sketch done with pencil first, just to give me a boundary, and then I'm going to start to apply this yellow here. I'm going to move it around. And because I've got my pencil marking where my stem is, I can just go ahead and paint right over it, and I'll still see where that is. Now, of course, I don't want to put my red on this until this is drier. So when I'm done with this here, don't worry about it being perfectly even. The yellow is going to perhaps look a little more intense in one area, more so than another. Spread this around. I've got my boundary shaped with my yellow, with my pencil mark. I want to make sure I go ahead and take care of that, going right to the edge. Okay. And I also want to look at my image, make sure I'm reading things clearly. And I noticed that it looks a little lighter. The yellow looks a little lighter around the core. So I'm going to use a sponge and I'm going to take a little off. See how it looks lighter there now? All right. And I'm just going to kind of blend that spot out a little so it doesn't look like I pulled so much up. I'm using a sponge shape. It also looks a little paler right here. So I'm going to make that area look like a little lighter yellow. And then I'm good to let this set and dry. Touch up some more areas there. Now, I do have a cast shadow. You probably can't see it in the camera range here, but if you look at it on your screen, you'll see that there is a cast shadow here. It's very faint, very light. It's got color in it. So I think in that case, what I want to do is I want to get that area wet with water first. I'm going to use a smaller brush, and it's right in here, and I want to set up a little area where things get wet here. Now this is a good start for the first image because there's no background. It'll allow you to concentrate all your work taking place in the actual peach itself and not have to worry about dealing with any background space to touch and infringe on the color in your the yellow here or the red when you place it. And we'll work our way toward dealing with a subject that gets a little more complex with a little more color. All right, now, colors in shadows are colors that you see in the object itself. Many times to the eye they simply look like they're gray. But of course, shadows are sitting on top of things that are color, and so there's going to be traces of color in that shadow, even though we're not accustomed to really paying that much attention to it. So what I'm going to do is take some of the colors that are actually in the peach itself, and I'm going to first of all take some yellow, and I'm going to go ahead and work it in very lightly. And of course it's going to fade because this is wet. I don't want a sharp edge. Shadows have soft edges that disappear. Okay. Let that rest a bit. Okay. It comes out even back here. Shadow is kind of bulky. I'm going to let that set. And while that's resting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and poke in a little of that color for the stem or core. And I'm just going to use the point of this brush, and I'm just going to poke a little brown sienna in there to landmark it. There's some light areas in there too that I do want to solidify its location so it can serve as a reference point for some of the other components of color that are in the actual peach itself. Okay, I'm going to use a little yellow ochre, which is more of a mustard brown or a mustard yellow, and I'm going to poke a little bit of that in here too. Okay, all right. And now I've got that location, a little broader base right there on that side, and some little stuff on the outer fringes too, a little texture out on the outer fringes. All right, I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to come back to the cast shadow, and I'm going to put a little red on it now. Right over the top. Right to the edge of the peach. Let that dry a little bit. Let me bring a little more of that red out in here. And I'm going to gray it down, which gives me a chance to talk a little about your color wheel and how it's important to kind of get a grasp of how this can help you. You heard me just use the term gray it down, or the phrase gray it down or tone it down. And that doesn't literally mean to mix gray and put it on top. It means that you want your color to become more neutral and less intense. And the good way to use color, understand how color can do that, is by understanding the color wheel's general distribution of colors on that tool. For instance, yellow and then red is here, and then blue is over on the right. Those are your primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. And by mixing two combinations, you get your secondary colors of orange, green, and purple. Now, if I want to tone or calm my yellow down, if it's too intense, it's too bright, I want to weaken it, then if I look at the color wheel and find where it is, I look directly across from it, and I've got purple. Well, I can mix up a little purple and put it over the top very thinly, and it'll make the yellow less intense. Okay. Now, what is purple made of? Purple is made of red and blue. So, I've already got red, so if I put a little blue over the top, that's going to make the color in this area a little grayer or a little less intense of red or yellow. It's going to tone it down. And so we call that color that's opposite from another color as a complement. So purple is the complement of yellow. Green is the complement of red and vice versa. Orange is blue's complement and blue is orange's complement. So if I wanted to tone down my orange, I'd put a little blue thinly over the top. Okay? So just so that you know that this is not just on how to mix color, but how to control color as well. Okay? So that's why it's always nice to have it around. All right. So I think my yellow is pretty dry enough to maybe start looking at the application of red. Now this time I do want to, just to make sure, because I just put that stem color in there, I just want to make sure it's nice and dry. All right. Now I want to start working with the red, but I want my red to be, very light. I don't have to be in a hurry to get looking exactly like that. I can take my time. So I've got some my red in the palette there already. I'm going to use, I think I'll use this size brush here. Not really small, not real big. And so I got some water. Take the excess out, stir it up, and I think I'm going to go ahead and put a little water down on my yellow. Okay. I really don't want it to get too red too soon, so if I can moisten this, it'll help. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead, and just so it doesn't take forever to dry, I'm going to blot just a little of that water off. Okay. Now you see what I did? Ooh, that watercolor on the stem wasn't completely dry. Okay. I have to be careful with that. I'm going to have to come back and doctor that up. Right now I see a lot of red right in here. In this area. And it envelops over, and you see a lot of it here. And you see, because I wet it down, it's got a nice little spongy quality to it, spongy texture, which looks a lot like the texture on that pear. Right? A little speckled look to it. Didn't even have to use the salt. Okay. I'm going to grab a little more. Good. I'm going to swing some around on this side. See, it's not a real even area of red. It's speckled. So I don't want to be too picky about placing it real evenly, like I'm painting a shelf or something like that. I want it to simulate the liveliness that's evident in the uneven coloration of it. There's a little bit of yellow showing through there more. I want to make sure I don't put too much red. Let me get a little more. And I'm going to come back and apply a little more into this area. Get it looking a little redder in the second application. And get that spongy look again. A little of that redder stuff here too. You know, one thing that I want to say about watercolor is that it has a distinction of being considered a real traditional medium. And in that case, the way that I'm using that word traditional, it tends to be a more of a slight or an insult, like traditional meaning more like old-fashioned. Okay, but it's a medium that's been around longer than acrylic painting has. That's for sure. This comes all the way up to that indention right there. And so it tends to always be connected to paintings of bluebonnets and what was normally categorized as very traditional subject matter, and maybe even by some trite subject matter. Trite means common, and not, I guess the only other way to say it, artsy-fartsy, which has another type of meaning. But I think it's important to understand this tool, because if it serves your purpose in your expression of ideas, then by all means you should use it. And I know there's probably a teacher or two that teach in several universities and locally, including this one, who might scoff at it, but I really think that it's up to you as an artist, as an art student, to see if there's something in it for you that does succeed in articulating your ideas in a way that perhaps oil and acrylic simply do not. Okay? All right. I'm going to get some more color in there now. There's a little bit over here where the stem is, so a slight trace of it. Not very much. And it's uneven as well, kind of speckled. You know, and you have to, even though we're not looking at the actual pear, we're looking at a pretty good reproduction in the photograph of the pear, and it still requires you to observe, to look carefully, even at the photograph, to see if you're missing something or not. I just realized that this red comes all the way to the edge here, all the way to the edge, and then some. A little trace of it hanging over right there. Okay. All right, I'm going to need to darken this some more. I'm going to let it dry a little, and I'm going to come and poke on that shadow again. And now I'm going to take a little blue, very, very little blue, transparent application using that cheap stuff I still have from last time. And I'm just going to put a super thin layer over the top to gray it down, to minimize the redness, to minimize the yellowness, and give it a grayer appearance that will allow it to read more like a shadow. Okay, there you go. Right. We'll let that dry a little. Probably hit it again. In the meantime, I'm going to come back and darken some of this red. Now, the red here gets a little murky. It's not as red as it is here, so it gets a little dirtier there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little burnt sienna, which is a reddish brown, and I'm going to mix it with that red, so that it gives me a slightly darker value and a muted value of red. You want to use black. If you can ever avoid using black, by all means avoid using black. It's a little too heavy, and it's going to seem out of place amongst the use of more crisper, more intense color. Okay, and black doesn't exist in nature. It's not in the fractured sunlight of the prism. You don't see black. All you see is color. Okay. So now I'm going to take this muted red, and I'm going to start to place some of it here, where it gets almost like a redder brown, or a reddish brown. I'm going to poke it around again to try to maintain that spongy quality. I'm not going to go over everything because I don't want to have just this brown now, or reddish brown. I want to see that previous couple of layers that I put down as well. I'm going to take a little more, work it in there, and a little more sienna to it. See? And get a little more paler, murkier red going on in there. From spot to spot, an area here and there. Let it dry. There's some of it here. And about that spongy quality, I mean, it's like, we oftentimes refer to or use the term peach fuzz to mean that soft, like almost furry coating on this fruit, and because of that, that's what it usually has an appearance of looking frosted, so that You have a sense that the skin has a little bit of tooth to it, like fur, like fuzz. Cover this up. There's too much yellow right in here. Okay. I'll wait and let that dry and put a little more on top of it too. A little trace of that red or brown here. Okay, let it dry some more. Okay. And I'm going to come back and intensify that core again. There's still too much yellow showing right here. Need to get rid of some of that, tone it down. There we go. All right. Let me intensify that stem one more time. Okay, now I gotta remember that this is wet, so I don't want to lose it again. So I'm gonna let this dry a lot longer now. Okay. I'm gonna let this dry a bit, come back and work on it, so I'll catch you on the flip side.